Topping today's news, the murder count continues to climb. The Attorney General lays out the legislative agenda, and the government has to find new land to build the Grand Bahama Hospital. Good evening, I'm Jarino Saunders, and this is your JCN Evening News. Thanks for joining us. The country's homicide count is up one notch after a husband and father was gunned down on the streets of the capital last night. Another young life taken as a result of gun violence. JCN's Destiny Johnson has the details in this report.
Homicide number 63 is on the books after another young man was gunned down in the Carmichael Road area late Tuesday night. Police were called to the scene of the country's latest homicide sometime around 10 p.m., where the lifeless body of a male was found on a sidewalk at the junction of Edmonton and Carmichael Roads. Police press liaison officer Superintendent Audley Peters gave reporters these details on the scene.
Our officers were dispatched, and on their arrival, they met a male lying on the sidewalk, and he was suffering from gunshot wounds. The medical technicians later examined him and determined that there were no signs of life. Our initial investigations so far reveal that the victim, along with other patrons, were at a business establishment when a small vehicle pulled up. Two males exited that vehicle armed with weapons and discharged them in the direction of the patrons. The victim ran from the scene and he was followed and subsequently shot by one of the armed bandits.
While Superintendent Peters withheld details of the victim, including whether he is known to police, our news team understands that the victim is 35-year-old Charles Singh Luke, a husband and a father who was charged with murder back in September of 2020. He was accused of being responsible for the death of Patrick Rowe Jr., whose body was found wrapped in a blue sheet in the area of Bacardi Road. With this being the 63rd homicide in the first 6 months of 2022, Superintendent expressed the police's concern for this rise in killings.
Any incident of murder is a concern for the police department. That's the first obligation, the protection of life and property. We also concerned of the proliferation of firearms on our streets and the need for people to let the police know who in the communities have these firearms so that we can take action and get these firearms off of the streets.
As for this latest homicide, Superintendent Peters makes this appeal.
We're appealing to persons who would have been here or passing and may have seen what happened or heard what happened to assist us with that information so that we could bring this matter to a closure. They can go to the Carmichael Road Police Station, or they can speak with Chief Superintendent Michael Johnson and his team at the Criminal Investigations Department.
Now, while reporters were on the scene of this crime with police, officers were alerted to a traffic fatality on the Old Paradise Island Bridge. Officers were dispatched to that scene involving a vehicle and a pedestrian. On their arrival, they found a Caucasian male lying in the southbound lane, unresponsive. Initial investigations revealed that the driver of a truck was traveling south on the Old Paradise Island Bridge when he felt an obstruction. Moments later, he discovered that he had struck a male pedestrian. Emergency medical services technicians visited the scene, and following their examination, they concluded that there were no signs of life. The coroner was appraised of the facts relating to this incident. Police will await an official identification by a next of kin to confirm the victim's identity and an autopsy to determine the exact cause of death. Police say investigations into these matters continue. For JCN News, I'm Destiny Johnson.
Thanks, Destiny. As senators continue to debate in the upper chamber on the New Day Government Budget 2022, the way forward, Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Senator Ryan Pinder, foreshadows some of his ministry's legislative plans under consideration for the first half of the upcoming fiscal year. In this next report by our Caitlin Babb, we hear some of the details regarding the Evidence Amendment Act 2022 and cannabis legislation.
The 2022-2023 national budget debate continuing in the upper chambers Wednesday morning, with Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs Senator Ryan Pinder foreshadowing a number of comprehensive legislations on the government's agenda that's under consideration. Modern legislation that will address long-standing issues in the country, including the Evidence Amendment Act 2022. This, according to AG Pinder, fundamentally important to bring finality to scores of families across the Bahamas as a result of missing family members from Hurricane Dorian and allow normalcy to return to day-to-day life. This is expected to be debated before the summer break.
See, Madam President, currently the law is a presumption of death after 7 years of being missing. You have family members who have perished and have gone missing in an event of peril like Hurricane Dorian. It's unequitable to cause for those family members to wait 7 years to receive finality in their lives with their family. It has imposition on insurance policies, estates, probates, the whole 9 yards, Madam President. This amendment seeks to rectify that issue in events of peril.
Also coming up for debate in this fiscal year is suite of healthcare legislation.
In addition to the recently tabled Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022, we will shortly table an amendment to the National Health Insurance Bill and introduce a modern and comprehensive Mental Health Bill 2022. Madam President, this will be the most comprehensive healthcare compendium of legislation advanced in recent memory to provide a comprehensive framework for healthcare, both physical and mental health care for our people, Madam President.
Now, one thing that has been on the previous minister-led administration is the regulation of cannabis. The Attorney General says a suite of laws that will pave the way for the regulation of medicinal cannabis is also on the government agenda.
Clothing, rope, building materials, all made from hemp. We will also provide a framework for the decriminalization of possession of small amounts of cannabis products, Madam President, as part of this suite of legislation.
Also on the government's agenda for this fiscal year is the Rehabilitation of Offenders Amendment Bill 2022, Carbon Exchange Bill 2022, and the Mining Authority Bill 2022. For JCN News, I'm Caitlin Babb.
Thanks, Caitlin. Meanwhile, Attorney General Ryan Pinder also clapping back against condemning remarks made by the official opposition regarding the announcement that all taxi plates inactive for 90 days or more would be recalled on Monday. Senator Michaela Barnett Ellis critiqued the last-minute announcement made on Monday, calling it wrong on many levels and calling upon the Minister of Transport to correct the process, claiming that the abrupt revocation of licenses is suspicious. In response to the claim, the Attorney General says that the goal of the government is to modernize the transportation sector in the country.
A critical component of this goal is to bring long overdue changes to the distribution of taxi plates. For decades, hundreds of industry participants have been unable to own taxi businesses as licenses have been under the control of a small group of persons, some who have inherited their plates. The government believes in supporting business ownership and the ability of taxi drivers to own their own business. Against this backdrop, the process has begun for dormant or rented plates to be recalled.
In support of the government's decision to recall, he contends that it is the government's policy that plates be under the control of those that are in ownership of the business. Also disputing claims of suspicious activity on the sudden announcement, he reveals that some 90 taxi plates were found to be inactive following an inventory check conducted in New Providence.
The publication of a public notice by the Road Traffic Department was a proactive decision to bring order and accountability to the registration and distribution of taxi plates. It should be noted that taxi plates will only be recalled in accordance with the law. The Ministry of Transport and Housing wishes to advise members of the public that the lifting of the moratorium on the issuance of new taxi plates was not executed in secret. Consultations were held with numerous stakeholders, including the Bahamas Taxi Cab Union, with a view to achieving the government's goal, the modernization of the transportation sector.
The senator also revealing that he has been advised of 30 dormant plate owners coming forward since the notice was made and were able to keep their plates, highlighting that the taxi operators have a legitimate claim to their plates. While speaking at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali, Rwanda, Prime Minister Philip Davis continues his message against global warming and the need for countries to work together to help mitigate the adverse impacts of rising sea levels and increasing temperatures. Arkale Campbell tells us more about what the Prime Minister had to say in this next report.
Prime Minister Philip Davis at the Commonwealth Business Forum 2022 in Kigali, Rwanda, Africa today addressed combating the fiscal challenges of climate change facing countries such as the Bahamas, as well as the need for financial cooperation and partnership, as he again reiterated that those least responsible for climate change are the most affected. The Prime Minister made reference to a recent report by the Commonwealth Secretariat highlighting the previous lack of funding for ocean financing.
Ocean conservation received only 0.01% of all development funding. The Secretariat also calculates that support for actions relating to the oceans received less than 2% of funding from the Green Climate Fund and only 0.7% from the Global Environmental Facility. Why is this? There's no obvious answer. Anecdotally, it appears that everyone imagines that much more is being spent, but it's not. Perhaps the neglect has been driven by the thought that someone else is taking care of it. Whatever the reason, it is clear that if the situation is not improved, we will fail in our efforts. And so my charge today is to ask, what can we in this room do to raise awareness of this? What can we do to drive urgent action for increased support?
In highlighting the financing instruments of the report that can be applied to the matter, Prime Minister Davis questions why such measures have not been taken, reminding fellow Commonwealth allies of the commitment and responsibility taken in coming together as an organization. The Prime Minister says that half of the Bahamas' fiscal debt is due to damages from hurricanes and other manifestations of climate change, adding that preventative measures would be much more effective.
Risk alleviation measures, which include the kinds of initiative around blue carbon that my government has recently enacted through legislation. Financial technology, which employs blockchain technology to conduct better forms of observation, inspection, and transparent data access. Blended ocean financing concepts, which include contributions from, for example, tourist fees. The creation of an ocean sustainable bank to provide a financing mechanism to support ocean action, and supplementary funding from trust and sovereign wealth funds. The list more than demonstrates that we know how to do what needs to be done, but why has it not been done?
In a Q&A session, the Prime Minister spoke on the Bahamas moving towards setting up a carbon exchange monetizing blue carbon, further stating that countries that contribute the most to greenhouse gases should have to pay for it.
Has entered into an arrangement with a management company. We're looking to setting up a platform for the purposes of, as I've said, monetizing that to help with the revenues to meet some of the other needs that our country require. If there's one other aspect to this that was touched on by my colleague, and that is the criteria to access funds, and that disenable countries like mine and his from accessing grant funds because they use the per capita criteria. We have been advocating, and I have been advocating since 2015 at the Samoa Pathway. Another test for that threshold, that is the vulnerabilities of the various countries, particularly SIDS. Let us use the multi-vulnerability index as opposed to the per capita index. That is a fairer approach. And that is, we'll ask others to join our voice in that.
Prime Minister Davis questioned the withdrawal of technical support from some members of the Commonwealth at a time of increasing need, rallying for unity by reminding members of the commonality they share in their association. For JCN News, I'm Cale Campbell.
Thanks, Cale. And in a move that can help keep food prices from any further increases in the country's leading food store chains, SuperValue food stores, they're planning to go solar. Rupert Roberts, president of the food store chain, telling a local daily on Tuesday to avoid any long-term impact from high energy costs, the installation of solar power will be implemented in at least 13 food stores, including Quality Supermarkets and the head office at Golden Gates, beginning the first week in August. Mr. Roberts says the company expects to cut electricity costs by as much as 75%. He revealed in the past the company has paid up to $1 million per month in electricity costs to run air conditioning units, freezers, coolers, and compressors 24/7 across the business during the summer months. He says currently they pay between $500,000 and $750,000 per month. Bahamas Power and Light has signaled an increase in electricity costs this summer due to a number of factors, including high fuel costs. Love 97 attempted to speak with SuperValue's president, Deborah Simonet, about the move to solar, but up to press time, we were told that she was still in meetings. We'll take a break here, and we'll be back after these commercials.